Let's talk about the two most difficult topics in America, race and racism. 2020 was a year like no other. COVID-19 opened our eyes to the realities of healthcare disparities, unprecedented unemployment, hunger and food apartheid, wealth disparity, isolation, and the extent of homelessness. This pandemic negatively affected millions of people, resulting in over 500,000 deaths in the United States. Its victims, disproportionately Black and brown people, the poor, and the elderly. During the crisis, we further witnessed murders of innocent Black and brown people, especially young adults, in open public spaces, some filmed via personal cell phones. When Mr. Floyd suffered and was murdered, we had to ask ourselves for 9 minutes and 29 seconds what it meant to be young, older, Black and brown, Indigenous, Asian, Latinx, LGBTQIA+, and neurodiverse people. We all saw it. We had to do something. We marched. We cried. We donated to causes. We read and we wrote. We'd watch movies and TV shows such as HBO's Lovecraft Country that showed us the horrors of systemic racism, which many like to pretend aren't here today because the past is never really gone. No justice, no peace. Black lives matter. Black lives matter. How can we navigate a racial reckoning with grace and excellence to create a new normal? We lead with a bold vision. Since Black enslaved persons first landed on these shores, many promises have been made and broken. Lawlessness and greed shape the implementation of unjust federal, state, and local policies, and laws undermine the lofty words of the Declaration of Independence. Nicole Hannah-Jones wrote in her 1619 essay entitled, "Our democracy's founding ideals were false when they were written. Black Americans have fought to make them true. Over and over, the fight for freedom in the name of America would win, but the backlash to the freedom fighters, particularly Black freedom fighters, and their beneficiaries would be severe, tearing families and communities apart for generations to come." Allow me to share an example. After the Civil War on January 16, 1865, an idea for massive land redistribution was developed for formerly enslaved people. With Special Field Order 15, 400,000 acres of land, a strip of coastline stretching from South Carolina to Florida, including Georgia's Sea Islands and the mainland 30 miles in from the coast, would be redistributed to the newly freed slaves. The response to the order was immediate, and by June, 40,000 freemen had been settled on 400,000 acres of Sherman's land. General Sherman later ordered that the Army could lend the new settlers mules, hence the phrase, 40 acres and a mule. So what happened? President Andrew Johnson, Lincoln's successor, overturned the order in the fall of 1865 and returned the land along the South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida coast to the planters who had originally owned it, to the very people who had declared war on the United States of America. If Sherman's order had not been rescinded, it is estimated that this land would have been worth $4.6 trillion in the African American community, according to Leah Penniman, a food justice activist and founding co-director of Soul Fire Farm, and Dr. Mark Hyman, founder and medical director of the Ultra Wellness Center, in a podcast entitled "Why Food is a Social Justice Issue." Imagine our world if this had been allowed to occur. $4.6 trillion. Let me give you another example, this one personal. After I graduated from the University of South Carolina with a degree in political science, I applied to the MIT City Planning Program in Cambridge, Massachusetts. When I received the formal letter of invitation, nothing could contain my joy. On MIT's campus, I knew that this was the place where I belonged. I looked forward to every classroom. On many nights, I stayed in the magnificent libraries, surrounding myself with the comforts of so much information. I became an enthusiastic learner on urban renewal, eminent domain, and gentrification. On this new journey, I wanted to make sure that Black and brown people would have a voice in their destiny and be treated with the respect and decency in such transactions. So I focused my work and academic pursuit to help communities of colors to negotiate win-win-win strategies. I had an amazing experience at MIT. There were uncomfortable spaces, believe me. I do recall an unpleasant experience that could have unraveled the confidence sharpened by my family and community. A white male classmate asked me, "How did you get into MIT?" Not with curiosity, but with disbelief. He further described to me why he belonged to MIT. His father and grandfather were engineers and/or graduates of MIT. I had not gone to an Ivy League institution, he pondered. In response, the voices of all of my family entered my consciousness and helped me to form the words that I needed to say. Don't let this person steal your pathway to wealth. I responded in a way that protected me and all others who were to come after me. As a citizen whose ancestors made it possible for him to have wealth and access to education, I remembered giving him insights on why he should consider being an ally, not an enemy. He was perplexed at the response, and we never had to have another conversation on this matter again. Dr. Joy DeGruy wrote in her book, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, America's Legacy of Enduring Injury and Healing. So we need to notice race as it relates to differential treatment, because the relationship between blacks and whites continue to be the most challenging issues facing our country today. The disparities with regard to health, wealth, and education are vast and expanding. All of these things make it more difficult to live as a black person in America than as a white person. But more importantly, all of these things make it more difficult for all of us to live in harmony as people. A second example, and one where a new platform of learning can occur, taking children of color from marginalized communities to places in real time, either in person or virtually, to spark their imagination in which to offer solutions to today's most complex societal issues. In 2008, I read about the construction of the Memorial to the Abolition of Slavery in Nantes, France, in a MIT publication. In my heart, I had to visit this place. I wrote to the architect, Professor Julian Bonder, at the Roger Williams University, and I shared with him that I wanted to bring a group of black women to visit the monument. He responded quickly. I am delighted to hear about your interest in the project. We need to inform you that construction has not yet begun, as we are in the final stages of the bidding process. I am saddened to tell you that unfortunately the memorial will not be completed at the time of your planned visit. It is scheduled for the end of 2010. I will be happy to assist you in the future. Many thanks for your interest. Yours, Julian Bonder. I was heartbroken. In 2018, the chance to visit the memorial arrived again. This time with no one to travel with me, I went on my own. From Paris, I took a train to Nantes. I don't speak a word of French. When I arrived at the station, I figured out how to ask for directions. I took a trolley to the designated location. When I stepped out of the trolley, no memorial was in sight. I could not believe it because I had traveled from Pennsylvania to Iceland to France and taken a 2-hour train ride. How could I have been so naive? Disappointed, I decided to have lunch and to breathe. As I was leaving this wonderful cafe, having had a delicious homemade French lunch, I asked the owner, "Where is this memorial?" As we stepped outdoors, she pointed to my left. "It's over there," she said in English. Then I saw the markers and carefully walked towards this sacred place. It was indeed emotionally powerful. As I had read, I saw the etchings of each ship that had brought black bodies and human beings to a place of no return. My heart skipped a beat at each glass plate. I had a hard time taking each step. When I finally made it below the ground level, I took another deep breath so that I could hear the music and the sounds of the water hitting the piers. On the wall of this hallowed hall showed a replica of a transatlantic slave trade map. How could one plan such a tortuous route for human bodies for economic good? A catalog was filled with narratives on past lives who traveled through this passageway. Another deep breath helped me to come to grips with a past that I could no longer refuse to see and witness. I was overcome with the unfathomable grief that I had suppressed for so long. After 2 hours, I felt strength in my legs to move and reconcile this memory from my past. As I would rise, I would feel great strength from these Black ancestors and be inspired to rededicate my life to youth development. These skills would prove worthy as we would face COVID-19 and the advocacy to social justice in America. On October 22nd, 2018, I wrote to 90 plus Black women via an email. I have visited many memorials in my life. It was very hard to be in a place where you could feel the hardships of so many on their quest for freedom, which would take another 400 years. The music, along with the sounds of the water, did soothe my curiosity and my soul. Just sat in the heart of this half a block long memorial for over 2 hours and was sad to experience the end of the voyage for some and the beginning of a hard life for many. I am here because of their sacrifices. Amen. Amen. Using technological platforms for young people, especially teachers in partnership with tech entrepreneurs, to rethink and reimagine how to train young minds will render enormous benefits. I'm committed to being this agent of change. I wrote Professor Bonder in 2019 and shared my experiences. He wrote back, "Dear Ms. McKinney, I am delighted to read your email about your visit. I am moved by your words. To read this 11 years after we first corresponded means the world to me. Incidentally, I received your mail right before I was going to give a talk at a panel session as part of the Transatlantic Slave Trade Conference at the Schomburg Center in Harlem. Every person from every corner of this great nation will continue to be impacted by injustices of the past and present. Regardless of our riches or resources, none of us will escape. With all that we have learned, particularly in 2020, how can we move forward? Allow me to offer 3 broad and key thoughts as we move towards a path for purpose. How can we navigate with grace and excellence? 1, be motivated, be fearless, and be courageous against hatred of any form. Black people near and far constantly live in an unpredictable world. There is work to do, and this work belongs to all of us. I encourage you to use your creative energies to direct and co-direct platforms to impact positive change. Play a critical part in creating models which are inclusive, equitable, and diverse to help those who are most marginalized. Leah Penniman, who I mentioned earlier, noted that it's easier to get weapons and drugs in poverty-concentrated communities than it is to purchase healthy food. Leah advocates for the right changes so that Black farmers will not continue to be harmed. We need to step up to make sure that such communities have access to financial resources, affordable housing, police protections, abundant and great choices, food choices, and high-quality education, institutions, and services. 2, be a courageous, empathetic, and caring leader. Too often, we take mental health and self-care for granted. To be great leaders, we need to be mentally and physically well because there are so many obstacles in the way. We see this being played out with Naomi Osaka, an amazing tennis player, as she's advocating for her self-care over profit. Here's another example. A recent McKinsey report entitled "The Economic State of Black America, What Is and What Could Be" indicated that today the median annual wage for Black workers is approximately 30% or $10,000 lower than that of a white worker, a figure with enormous implications for household economic security, consumption, and the ability to build wealth. Black workers make up 12.9% of the U.S. labor force today, but earn only 9.6% of the total U.S. wages. How do we cope with such rage, explicit and internalized? We advocate for smart changes. We vote in every election. We learn to invest in the long game. We join nonprofit and community boards. We take long walks, and we breathe. We find our best words and actions to showcase our passion for justice. We share our voice, our joy, our commitment, and we are passionate on a continuous learning journey. 3, be laser focused to advance democracy. As Nicole Hannah-Jones wrote, through centuries of Black resistance and protest, we have helped the country live up to its founding ideas, and not only for ourselves, Black rights struggles paved the way for every other rights struggle, including women's and gay rights, immigrant and disability rights. With my nephew, I am re-experiencing the wonders of resistance, persistence, and courage of Malcolm X, as written by the late Manny Marable in his award-winning signature book, Malcolm X, A Life of Reinvention. This beautifully written story narrates how Malcolm X went from living in poverty to prison. He rose from criminal activities to become a renowned leader. Malcolm X reinvented himself from one who held polarizing views to becoming a diplomat. His life concluded as a martyr. Malcolm X's trial and tribulations led to a national movement. This is a powerful experience for us both, and I hope that through our conversations, we will gain a great understanding of what it takes to be true ambassadors in a post-COVID world. In closing, to navigate this new world with grace and excellence, let's unpack the past struggles and all of the successes from 400 years ago to the day, to show how we can love and live in a just and equitable society for all. Here are a few questions for you and all the people you know and love. What have you done about all of this? What do you intend to do about all of this, now and in the future? Where have you shown grace and courage? By the graces of the universe, this may not be your story, but it could have been, and someday it may actually be. Your words and your actions will take you where you need to be. In the words of the late Nelson Mandela, President of South Africa, no one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin or his background or his religion. People must learn to hate, and if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love. For love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite. Long Walk to Freedom, the autobiography of Nelson Mandela. Thank you.